difficulties, but okay. So how many of you found that that user's experience like easy? Not many, right? Like it looked pretty hard. Now that's actually my library, Sylvan Way in Bremerton and Kitsap, and we've actually got really incredible staff. They wouldn't point you around to a bunch of stuff, but they will point you around occasionally, just maybe because of the physical environment. So that's one of the questions we're asking ourselves at the library, hoping to take some of your insights and incorporate those into the conversation. So I get something, and I promise you'll get something too. So I guess to begin this, I got a little make-believe slideshow, in that it's not very good. So, did the video. Okay, so I guess before we do that, so you guys have some familiarity, I guess, with user experience and maybe some of the better practices, maybe even some principles. I'd like to try and have us throw those out there. So I know that's a really broad question, but does anyone want to venture to is there a guiding principle you go by when you think about user experience? Is there one guiding principle? Anybody?
There are no magic bullets. That's the guiding principle.
There's no.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
There's no. Okay. All right. Well, okay. Well, when you're okay, let's get an attempt.
You can't assume that your experience is translatable to everyone.
All right. All right. Anybody else? You know what? Use your help. You're a great writer. Can you help me write? You don't mind, honestly? Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so not translatable to others. That's actually really good. Of course it's good.
Pardon my spelling.
Information architecture actually took a lot from real architecture in designing navigation. There's this idea called wayfinding, and architects use this to design things like airports and major hubs of transportation. So tell people where they are.
Okay, so wayfinding as one of these decent principles as far as and it comes from probably ancient times, I imagine. Maybe not always articulated that far back. Let's see. Anybody else have any ideas? So,
at least in the public libraries, I find a lot of it is convenience.
Convenience.
You know, what's the most convenient thing for the patron?
Right. And I know, in terms of the origins of HCI, efficiency was.
Can you explain HCI?
Human-computer interaction.
Okay. HCI. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And
Efficiency
efficiency
was really critical to usability. It measured what was useful. It was all about productivity.
And along with efficiency goes the ease of learning. So it keeps them learning. Figure out the system.
Learnability.
Yeah.
Okay, I speak in really layman's terms.
Yeah.
Like HCI is really a stretch for me. Learnability.
And error recovery. Being able to undo and recover from when something doesn't happen the way you expect it to happen.
Task-oriented, like if you know that your users have a number of tasks that they're trying to complete within your setting, meet those.
And task-oriented.
Yeah, task-oriented. Thank you. So the only time I ever was involved in, say, web design or anything like that, we were redesigning our homepage for a previous job at another library, and I'll share. We used this book as kind of, well, for us less familiar with the profession of usability and design for the web. We use this as kind of our standby, and just kind of these are some great principles. They're not everybody's principles, but there's some great principles to, again, not to make the user think, how to make things easier to use, better to use. And so I thought I would, if again, we've got quite a bit going, but those were things I was maybe going to take from too. And this isn't all about just usability, and it's definitely not about usability on the web, although, or specifically, it's about usability in physical space, and how can we bring some of that knowledge to this. So like, I'm going to say, don't make me think, just because I'm not I don't think it's gospel, but I think it's pretty good. Anybody have any ideas about don't make me think? First of all, how many people are familiar with this concept? Perfect, right? Anybody have any ideas about what that means? Just to get it out.
For me, it's always been like, it's easy to overload people. It's easy to overload like that cognitive process. It's easy to say like, that's too much, so my brain's gonna kind of just collapse on me. I'm gonna have a hard time making decisions.
Yeah, any other ideas on Don't Make Me Think?
I think I like the title, especially I've heard it a couple times, but users are always thinking. So you need to understand that their brains are going to be working in some
I think it's more that you want
slowly.
thinking about the right things.
Right. Actually, I used to work at a place, and I don't want to say anything, but work design, architecture, and exterior, and people get hurt all the time. They never really tested it on people who might be thinking about the concert playing there, or the fact that you can't put a beer on the little wall because it's kind of angle. But if you're drunk, they actually test it on people who are drinking.
Yeah.
They're going to think, but their head's not going to be in the right space.
Maybe beer cans on strings or something like that.
Which is,
Which is, I mean,
I would love to have a usability test with a bunch of like a drunk poster. Two more shots.
but it is a really important concept, though. It is a really important concept to test your stuff, whether it's physical, in the physical world or in the virtual world, on somebody who's going to be using it, because there's nothing worse than designing it for a wheelchair user and then they can't use it because it's 3 inches too skinny. I mean, that being said, for all kinds of things that happen to people in the physical world. So, I mean, I think it's great if you don't find a drunk user. I mean, your user's going to be drunk.
Let's put that up. I think I'm capturing what you're kind of saying. How about universal? How about that's one maybe? Can we put universal? Thank you.
Well, because universal
You
design.
don't have to know your
Thanks, sir.
user, not to like make it universal, just know who's going to be using it.
Yeah.
So that it's made for that person, right?
And then also, yeah, so universal, and then,
Universal design is a movement in the design field.
but also you're talking about knowing your user. Can we just write knowing your user?
What state will they be drunk?
And I'm just going to speak up real quick. I like the paradox you raised about the don't make me think. I always think about that, like yeah, we are thinking. We're thinking beings. So why would don't make me think? It's kind of, it's derogatory, really. I mean, and so I think when I read it and when I look at it and think about it, I think it just says, for most of us, when we go into a new situation, to use a new thing, which, like I'm thinking about the library, how many people come into the library for the first time in 10, 15 years, is that in general, they're willing to think, they're willing to answer a lot of questions themselves, but, you know, the broad majority, you want to plan for the majority that's not ready to figure out how to use your library. You want to just kind of help them use your library right away, you know, and maybe physical spaces can do that. And I think that's what don't make me think means, is like reducing questions. Don't ask me questions, and don't make me ask questions of myself, which is even worse. Yeah.
Just to give you an example from, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I do want to honor you.
My interpretation of that is don't create excess, or don't make me exert excessive effort
Don't make me confused.
for what the task calls for.
Okay.
So it shouldn't require more effort than it needs to. You know that 3 little bears or 3 bears?
Yeah, yeah.
Not too much, not too little, just right.
Uh-huh.
So just the right amount of effort for what the task is demanding.
Okay.
So of course you're always
I
thinking.
see, yeah.
So maybe the right effort.
Something that I do a lot too. Like we have to have some kind of hand-holding, like a lot of apps have tutorials, hand-holding. If you have too much, you can't just get to the app, you can't be efficient. But if you don't have any, you don't know what the hell you're doing. So yeah, it's exactly.
I think we're
just right.
I was really worried about like how this would go, getting like these principles. And as you said, like first thing, like there really are no principles, or there's no one principle, and that's probably it's extremely true. There's this mix, and there's always, and the principles are changing depending on the user and depending on the service or the thing that's being used. So yeah, I'm really happy with how much we've got. I want to shift gears here just because I got some really. Maybe I think might be fun stuff to do. So let's try that. I'm going to skip Don't Make Me Think because I think we got that enough.
Can I actually throw in one thing?
Yeah,
Is that it's more the devil's advocate side that we have to be careful not to make things too dumb, too easy. There's some stuff right now. There's this great book, if you haven't read it, you should read it. It's called Shopcraft, the Soul Craft. And it's this idea that essentially that our movement to industrialize has kind of turned us all, everything, education system all the way up, has kind of turned us into withering idiots.
Yeah, okay. So assume intelligence. Okay, don't make me think, but assume intelligence, right?
But also sometimes the process is important. Peter Morville, he spoke at high school a few years ago, and he was talking, it was from a knowledge management perspective, but he was talking about how corporations are making it so easy for call center people to get the right answer quickly. They actually are losing their population of employees, their knowledge workers is becoming dumber because of the whole berry picking aspect that people need to go through to learn something. That you touch one thing, and maybe that's not what you want to learn, what you need, but it makes an impression on you, learn something else, and it's a process you need to go through it. So I think we're a long way away from simplifying things so much that boom, you have an instant, easy answer. But there is something to be said about, in the video that you showed, that idea of the person having to go to the stacks 2 or 3 times, because you do see other books and other ideas.
And it's not just serendipity, we see these examples all the time, although I can't think of a great one, of something we use, something we do, and we derive pleasure just from learning or figuring out how it works. There's just, and there's a lot of personalities like that, and that's an excellent point. How do we write that?
I don't know.
Well, what you talked about is also in this book called The Timeless Way of Building by Christopher Alexander, and it's a little bit of I don't know what it's viewed as by other people, but for me it's a classic in architecture and in building anything. And he talks about this nameless quality. That's why I guess you could come up with a name.
Right. Nameless quality.
Nameless quality. No, really, he calls it quality without a name. And beyond all of these principles, he talks about patterns of living and how the place comes into its identity and personality by the patterns of living created by the people that occupy that space.
You're ready to talk physical spaces, aren't you?
I have a name for it. It's a little bit related to generative spaces, and it's about people getting a space and creating the space to meet their needs. And a lot of these generative spaces have light, beauty, visual interests, and they're based on people's dreams and people's aspirations. So one of the examples that I read about is a community health center, and they just focus on wellness, and that's, it's more physical stuff.
So as far as his point, did we get something? The nameless quality, that's great. I kind of think the experience of the experience, that we're not always just trying to get what we need easily. Sometimes we're just, we like to do things. We like to interact with things.